There are moments in life when the heavens seem silent. The days move forward with ordinary rhythm. The sun rises, the clock continues its patient march, and nothing appears different to the natural eye. Yet beneath the surface, unseen currents are moving, deep foundations are being laid, doors that have remained closed for years are beginning to loosen on their hinges. Circumstances that appeared fixed and permanent are quietly shifting, and if you listen carefully, not merely with your ears, but with the deeper hearing of the soul, you may sense that something significant is approaching. Many people assume that God only works through dramatic signs. They expect thunder from the sky, unmistakable miracles, or some overwhelming display that leaves no room for doubt. But more often than not, divine movements begin in silence. A seed grows beneath the soil long before anyone sees a blade of green break through the earth. The dawn arrives gradually, before the sun appears on the horizon. The greatest works of God frequently begin where human eyes cannot yet perceive them. Perhaps you have been walking through a season of waiting, not a few days, not a few weeks, but months, maybe even years. You have prayed prayers that seem to echo back unanswered. You have trusted when circumstances gave you little reason to trust. You have continued moving forward, even when the road ahead appeared hidden in fog. The temptation during such seasons is to conclude that nothing is happening. But what if the waiting was never evidence of abandonment? What if the delay was not denial? What if the silence was not absence? What if God has been preparing something far greater than you imagined, and the very things that have frustrated you were actually protecting the timing of a blessing too large to arrive prematurely? Human beings are often eager for immediate answers. We want quick solutions. We want every chapter explained before we have even reached the next page. Yet God sees the entire story while we are still struggling to understand a single paragraph. Imagine a child standing beside a master builder. The child sees piles of stone, scattered timber, and workers moving materials from one place to another. To the child, the activity may seem confusing. It may even appear unproductive, but the builder sees the completed structure long before it rises above the ground. So it is with God. What appears to be disorder may actually be preparation. What appears to be delay may actually be design. What appears to be loss may be making room for something greater. There are blessings that arrive quickly, and there are blessings that require preparation. A sudden gift may change a day, but a carefully prepared destiny can change an entire life. Consider how often people ask for transformation while resisting the process that creates it. They pray for strength, yet become discouraged when challenges arise. They pray for wisdom, yet resent the lessons that wisdom requires. They pray for greater purpose, yet grow impatient when the road becomes difficult. The truth is that God is often more concerned with who you are becoming than with what you are receiving. A blessing without preparation can become a burden. Opportunity without character can become destruction. Success without wisdom can become a trap. Therefore, God sometimes prepares the person before he delivers the promise. And perhaps that is exactly what has been happening in your life. The struggles you faced were not meaningless. The disappointments were not wasted. The seasons of uncertainty were not empty chapters. Every tear, every prayer, every act of faith in the darkness has been shaping something within you. You may not realize how much stronger you are today than you were a year ago. You may not recognize how much wisdom has been forged through your trials. You may not see how many dangers you were protected from simply because certain doors remained closed. Yet one day, when the pieces come together, you will look back and understand that God was writing a story larger than the one you imagined for yourself. There is a tendency among human beings to measure life by visible evidence alone. We celebrate what can be counted, displayed, and admired. But some of the most important developments in a person's life are invisible. Faith grows quietly, character develops gradually, trust deepens through hidden struggles, and God's work often advances beneath the surface, long before it becomes visible to the world. Do not underestimate what is happening in the unseen places. The roots of a tree grow deep before the branches stretch high, and the deeper the roots, the greater the strength required to support what is coming. Perhaps the reason your preparation has felt so long is because what is coming is larger than you think. Perhaps the weight of the future blessing requires a stronger foundation than you currently feel. Perhaps heaven has been preparing you not merely for a better season, but for an entirely different level of purpose. There is a remarkable truth that many overlook. God often begins his greatest works at the very moment people are tempted to give up, when hope seems weakest, when resources seem smallest, when possibilities appear exhausted. That is often where divine intervention enters the story. Not because God enjoys watching people struggle, but because there comes a point when human strength reaches its limits, and a person finally discovers the necessity of depending upon something greater than themselves. Dependence on God is not weakness. It is clarity. It is the recognition that the Creator sees what the creature cannot. It is the understanding that infinite wisdom is guiding what finite understanding struggles to comprehend. And if God truly sees the end from the beginning, then his delays are not random. His timing is not careless. His plans are not uncertain. Every moment is held within his knowledge. Every detail remains under his authority. Every circumstance ultimately answers to his purpose. That does not mean life becomes easy. It does not mean every question receives an immediate answer. But it does mean that uncertainty does not have the final word. Fear does not have the final word. Disappointment does not have the final word. Because God has the final word. And when God speaks over a situation, possibilities emerge where none seem to exist. Paths appear where none could be seen. Hope rises where despair once ruled. The world often tells people to trust only what they can see, yet some of the greatest realities cannot be seen at all. You cannot see love, but you know its power. You cannot see truth, yet it shapes civilizations. You cannot see hope, yet entire lives are sustained by it. And you cannot always see the hand of God, yet his fingerprints are everywhere. They are present in the doors that opened unexpectedly. They are present in the disasters that never happened. They are present in the strength that carried you through days you thought would break you. They are present in the quiet moments, when peace arrived without explanation. Sometimes God's greatest miracles are not the events that astonish the world. Sometimes his greatest miracles are the transformations that occur within the human heart. A fearful person becomes courageous. A bitter person becomes forgiving. A broken person becomes whole. A wandering soul discovers purpose. These are not small miracles. These are profound works of grace. And if God can transform a heart, he can transform a circumstance. If he can renew a mind, he can renew a future. If he can resurrect hope within a weary soul, he can certainly bring new possibilities into situations that appear impossible. That is why you must not judge your future solely by your present circumstances. The chapter you are living is not the entire book. The storm you are facing is not the final destination. The waiting season is not the permanent reality. Something is moving. Something is developing. Something is approaching. Not because of luck, not because of chance, but because God remains faithful, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. Faithfulness is not measured by how things appear today. Faithfulness is measured by God's unchanging nature, and because his nature does not change, his promises remain secure. The same God who guided people through wilderness seasons still guides today. The same God who brought light into darkness still brings light today. The same God who opened doors no human could open still possesses that authority today. Therefore, do not allow discouragement to convince you that your story has ended. Do not allow temporary setbacks to define permanent conclusions. Do not allow present difficulties to become the lens through which you view your future. Lift your eyes higher. Look beyond the immediate moment. Recognize that there may be movements occurring beyond your current understanding. For all you know, conversations are happening that will impact your future. Opportunities are developing that have not yet become visible. Connections are being formed. Paths are being prepared. Answers are drawing nearer than you realize. And while you wait, continue becoming the person God is calling you to be. Continue walking faithfully. Continue choosing integrity. Continue choosing hope when cynicism seems easier. Continue trusting when certainty remains unavailable. Because faith is not the absence of questions. Faith is the decision to trust God, even when every answer has not yet arrived. And there comes a moment in many lives when preparation meets opportunity. The hidden years meet the visible breakthrough. The silent season meets the season of fulfillment. The prayers meet their answers. The waiting meets its purpose. When that moment arrives, many will call it sudden, but it will not truly be sudden. It will be the result of countless unseen moments, countless acts of faith, countless days when you chose to keep going despite not knowing what lay ahead. The blessing may appear overnight, but the preparation was years in the making, and that is why you must remain attentive, remain expectant, remain willing to believe that God's work extends far beyond what you can presently observe, because what is approaching may be larger than you imagine, not merely a change in circumstances, not merely a temporary improvement, but the beginning of a new chapter that reveals why the previous chapters unfolded as they did. There are seasons when God teaches. There are seasons when God shapes. There are seasons when God prepares. And there are seasons when what has been prepared finally begins to emerge into the light. The remarkable thing is that many people stand closest to that moment without realizing it. They become weary just before the breakthrough. They become discouraged just before the answer arrives. They mistake the final stretch of preparation for evidence that nothing is happening, when in reality, the foundations beneath them have never been stronger. It is often in those final stretches of waiting that the greatest test of faith emerges, not the faith required to begin the journey, but the faith required to continue when every visible sign seems delayed. Beginning is often accompanied by excitement. There is energy in the first step, enthusiasm in the first prayer, confidence in the first vision of what might be. Yet the middle of the journey is different. The middle is where perseverance is formed. The middle is where character is refined. The middle is where many people turn back because they mistake unfinished work for failed work. Imagine a sculptor standing before a massive block of stone. To an observer, each strike of the hammer may seem destructive. Pieces fall away. Dust fills the air. The original shape disappears more and more with every blow. Yet the sculptor sees something the observer cannot see. He sees the figure hidden within the stone. Every strike is not destroying the masterpiece. Every strike is revealing it. In much the same way, there are moments when God allows certain things to fall away from our lives. Relationships change, plans unravel, expectations collapse, familiar routines disappear. We may mourn the loss of what once seemed essential, yet sometimes those losses are not acts of destruction. They are acts of revelation. They are removing what does not belong, so that what truly belongs may emerge. Many people pray for a greater future while clinging tightly to an old identity. They ask God to lead them into new territory, while refusing to release what has become comfortable. Yet growth often requires surrender. The hand cannot receive something new while grasping tightly to what has already passed. This is why some seasons feel uncomfortable. God is gently loosening our attachment to things that can no longer accompany us into the future. He has prepared, not because those things were entirely bad, not because they served no purpose, but because their purpose was temporary. There are people who were meant for a chapter, not the entire story. There are opportunities that were stepping stones, not destinations. There are seasons that were classrooms, not permanent residences. Wisdom grows when we learn to recognize the difference. Perhaps there are things in your life that you once considered indispensable, yet if you look back honestly, you may discover that God carried you forward even after those things disappeared. The very losses you feared would destroy you became the experiences that strengthened you. You survived what you once thought would break you. You endured what you once believed was impossible. You discovered reserves of courage you did not know existed, and through it all, God remained present, not always in ways that were obvious, not always in ways that were dramatic, but present nonetheless. His presence often reveals itself through endurance, through the strength to take another step, through the peace that arrives in the middle of uncertainty, through the quiet assurance that whispers, "Keep going." That whisper has sustained countless people throughout history, not because they knew exactly what would happen next, but because they trusted the one who did. One of the great misunderstandings about faith is the belief that it eliminates uncertainty. In reality, faith often exists precisely because uncertainty remains. If everything were already visible, faith would not be necessary. Faith is the bridge that carries a person across the gap between what is known and what has not yet been revealed. And every significant journey contains such gaps. No explorer sees the entire path before beginning. No farmer sees the harvest while planting seeds. No builder sees the finished structure while laying the foundation. Yet each proceeds because they trust in realities that are not yet visible. Faith functions in a similar way. It recognizes that unseen realities can be just as real as visible ones. It understands that today's circumstances are not the only forces shaping tomorrow. It acknowledges that God is working in dimensions beyond immediate perception. There is something profoundly liberating about this realization. It means you do not have to carry the burden of understanding everything. You do not have to solve every mystery before moving forward. You do not need complete knowledge in order to trust. Human beings often exhaust themselves trying to control every outcome. They analyze every possibility, predict every danger, and attempt to arrange every detail. Yet life repeatedly demonstrates how limited such control truly is. Unexpected opportunities appear. Unexpected challenges arise. Unexpected blessings arrive. Unexpected turns reshape entire futures. The illusion of complete control fades quickly when confronted with reality. But faith offers something better than control. It offers confidence in God's sovereignty. Control says, everything depends on me. Faith says, I will do my part and trust God with what lies beyond my reach. Control says, control produces anxiety because it places impossible responsibility upon human shoulders. Faith produces peace because it recognizes the limits of human power and the limitless nature of divine wisdom. This peace does not mean passivity. It does not mean sitting idle and expecting life to unfold without effort. Rather, it means working diligently while remaining free from the crushing burden of believing everything depends solely upon your strength. God calls people to action, but he never intended them to carry the universe. There is a freedom in recognizing that some battles belong to him, some doors can only be opened by him, some circumstances can only be transformed by him, and some blessings can only arrive through his timing. When people truly grasp this truth, they begin to live differently. They become less frantic, less fearful, less obsessed with outcomes, more focused on faithfulness, more attentive to purpose, more aware of God's presence in ordinary moments. Because life is rarely changed by a single dramatic event alone. More often, transformation occurs through 1,000 small acts of obedience accumulated over time. A kind word spoken when bitterness seemed easier, a prayer offered when doubt felt stronger, a step forward taken despite uncertainty, a decision to trust when fear demanded retreat. These moments may appear insignificant in isolation, yet together they shape destinies. The future is often built through choices that seem ordinary in the present. That is why no act of faith is wasted, no prayer is wasted, no season of growth is wasted, no lesson learned through hardship is wasted. God has a remarkable ability to weave together experiences that appear unrelated and transform them into something meaningful. What seems random to us often fits perfectly within a larger design. Years later, people frequently discover that the skills they learned in one season prepared them for opportunities in another. The pain they endured gave them compassion for someone else's struggle. The failures they experienced taught them wisdom that success never could. The delays they resented protected them from paths that would have harmed them. Suddenly, pieces that once seemed disconnected reveal an astonishing coherence. What appeared chaotic reveals purpose. What appeared meaningless reveals significance. What appeared accidental reveals intention. And perhaps one day you will look back upon this very season and realize that God was preparing something far greater than you currently imagine. Perhaps the waiting has not been empty. Perhaps the challenges have not been pointless. Perhaps the uncertainty has not been evidence of abandonment. Perhaps every part of it has been contributing to a future that is still unfolding. There is a tendency among people to focus on what they lack The mind naturally notices closed doors, unmet desires, and unanswered questions. Yet gratitude shifts perspective. It reminds us that even during difficult seasons, evidence of God's goodness remains present. The breath in your lungs, the strength to continue, the lessons learned through experience, the relationships that have endured, the protection you never noticed, the provisions you once took for granted. These gifts may not always appear dramatic, but they are profound. Gratitude trains the soul to recognize God's faithfulness in the present, rather than postponing appreciation until every desire is fulfilled. And strangely enough, gratitude often becomes the lens through which future blessings are recognized. A grateful heart notices opportunities that a bitter heart overlooks. A grateful heart perceives possibilities that discouragement obscures. A grateful heart remains open to God's work because it has learned to recognize His fingerprints everywhere. This does not mean ignoring pain. It does not mean pretending difficulties do not exist. It simply means refusing to allow difficulties to become the entire story. Because the story is larger than the struggle. The purpose is larger than the obstacle. The promise is larger than the problem. There is an old temptation that visits many people during seasons of waiting. It whispers that their lives are insignificant. It suggests that their efforts do not matter. It insists that nothing meaningful is happening. But such whispers thrive in ignorance. They depend upon limited vision. They rely upon the assumption that visible results are the only measure of value. Yet God often works through seemingly small beginnings. A single conversation changes a life. A single act of kindness alters a future. A single decision redirects a destiny. Small things matter because God specializes in multiplying what appears insignificant. A seed becomes a forest. A stream becomes a river. A faithful step becomes a journey. Therefore, never despise the small beginnings in your life. Never underestimate the importance of ordinary faithfulness. Never assume that today's modest actions lack eternal significance. You do not know what God may choose to do through them. The future often arrives disguised as ordinary responsibility. People expect greatness to announce itself with fanfare. Yet many of God's greatest opportunities first appear as simple acts of obedience. The willingness to show up. The willingness to learn, the willingness to serve, the willingness to trust. These qualities may not attract applause, but they create foundations capable of supporting extraordinary purpose. And foundations matter. A building rises only as high as its foundation allows. A tree stands only as strong as its roots permit. A life flourishes only as deeply as its character extends. Perhaps this is why God invests so much attention in hidden development. The world celebrates visible success. God cultivates invisible strength. The world rewards appearance. God transforms character. The world notices outcomes. God shapes the heart. And when the heart is prepared, the outcomes eventually follow. You may feel as though you are standing on the edge of something you cannot yet define. A sense that change is coming. A feeling that the current chapter is drawing toward a transition. Such moments often carry both excitement and uncertainty. Excitement because possibility is awakening. Uncertainty because the details remain unclear. Yet this mixture is natural. Few people receive a complete map of their future. Most receive enough light for the next step, and then another step, and then another. Faith grows in that space. Trust deepens there. Character matures there. The path becomes visible, not all at once, but progressively, as obedience continues. So if God is indeed preparing something significant for your life, do not become consumed with demanding every detail in advance. Instead, focus on the next act of faithfulness, the next prayer, the next opportunity to trust, the next decision to walk forward, because destiny is rarely reached through one giant leap. More often it is reached through thousands of faithful steps, taken one at a time, and with every step, God continues shaping, guiding, protecting, and preparing. Even now, while answers remain incomplete, even now, while certain questions remain unresolved, even now, while the future is still emerging from the horizon of the unseen, the story is moving forward. The preparation is continuing. The foundations are strengthening. The pieces are aligning. And though you may not yet fully comprehend what God is doing, there may come a day when the wisdom of His timing becomes so clear that you will wonder why you ever doubted his faithfulness in the first place. Until then, continue listening, continue trusting, continue watching with expectation. For the God who begins a work does not abandon it midway through the process, and the very fact that he has sustained you this far may be evidence that far greater things are still being prepared beyond the limits of your present vision, waiting for the appointed moment when what has long been hidden begins to emerge with a clarity that transforms everything you thought you knew about the journey. So as you leave this moment, carry this truth deep within your heart. The God who has sustained you through every storm has not brought you this far to abandon you now. The same hand that guided you through confusion is guiding you still. The same voice that whispered hope into your darkest nights is speaking even now, whether you recognize it or not. Do not measure your future by your present limitations. Do not measure God's plans by today's circumstances. What you see is only a fraction of what is being prepared. Beyond the horizon of your understanding, doors are being arranged, paths are being cleared, and purposes are being aligned in ways you cannot yet comprehend. One day, what now feels like waiting will reveal itself as preparation. What now feels like silence will reveal itself as wisdom. What now feels like delay will reveal itself as perfect timing. And when that day comes, you will not merely celebrate the blessing, you will understand the journey that made you ready to receive it. Stand firm, therefore. Walk forward with courage. Refuse to surrender to fear, doubt, or discouragement. Lift your eyes higher than your obstacles, and place your confidence in the one who sees the end from the beginning. Trust that every prayer has been heard, every tear has been seen, and every step of faith has mattered, because God is not finished with your story. The chapter you are living is not the final chapter. The struggle you are facing is not the final verdict. The waiting season is not your permanent address. Something greater is coming, something beyond what your fears predicted, something beyond what your disappointments allowed you to imagine. And when it arrives, you will recognize that God was working all along, weaving together every setback, every lesson, every victory, and every trial into a masterpiece only He could create. So listen carefully, stay awake in faith, remain expectant, keep your heart open and your spirit ready, for what is about to touch your life is not random, not accidental, and not beyond God's control. The God who created the stars, who numbers the days, and who holds eternity in His hands, is still writing your story, and the next chapter may be greater than anything you have dared to believe.